Let's talk now, though, to Annabelle Denham, Director of Communications at the IEA, because this morning a piece in the paper suggesting that there's so many people now refusing to pay their licence fee that BBC audiences are declining to such an extent that they may not actually be able to keep this model alive as long as they want to continue to pay exorbitant amounts of money to people, never get rid of anyone, and make programmes that nobody wants to watch. Annabelle, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't think that's an unfair description of the BBC currently, is it?
No, I don't think so at all. I think the National Audit Office is spot on when it says that the BBC faces an uncertain financial future and that it's been slow to change on issues such as the fall in viewing by younger audiences.
Right.
You know, absolutely spot on. In the UK, 18 to 34-year-olds watch 7 times as much Netflix and YouTube as BBC One content. They spend more time watching Netflix and YouTube than any other public service channels put together. The BBC model is simply outdated. It's not reflective of viewing habits, and it doesn't take into account the fact that streaming services have emerged in recent years and are attracting audiences in their swathes. I mean, quite simply, the license fee needs to be abolished. As your listeners will know, Mike, the funding model is anachronistic. I mean, anybody who owns a TV set, regardless of whether they watch the BBC, has to pay it.
And there was a couple of sort of arguments being made on social media yesterday by people who are obviously in defence of the BBC, saying, oh, yeah, but, you know, Netflix are now charging upwards of £12, £13 a month in order for you to watch it, but you don't get all of the great things that the BBC also provides. Well, the only problem with that argument is that, you know, if you want to have 4 or 5 people on your Netflix account, you can do it for that kind of money in 4 or 5 different households. If you wanted to have BBC access for those 5 different households, they'd each have to buy a £15 a month stipend from the licence fee.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think also the important thing is that people choose to pay Netflix. They choose to pay £13.99 or whatever it is every year to get Netflix services. It doesn't matter objectively what the service is providing if subjectively people are willing to pay it. Whereas what we have with the BBC is we have a levy on households. They have to pay £157.50 every year if they own a TV set. And if they don't, they could end up with fines or in court. I mean, we know that license fees make up 1 in 10 of magistrate hearings in England and Wales. And I do think that supporters of the BBC often make these two conflicting statements. They say, oh, we can't let the beloved BBC go to the wall by scrapping the license fee. And then they also say, but it's got wonderful programming. Well, these two things are mutually exclusive. If it has good programming, then it can, and I happen to believe will survive. But if it doesn't, then it will go to the wall, and it should, for failing to adapt and for failing to provide a service that people want.
And there's no doubt that in the last 10 years or so, the programming has been dire. You know, aside from probably a few things that you could name on the fingers of one hand, nobody really watches anything on the BBC because it's an appointment to watch it, you know. And an interesting thing for me as well was they rejected the new series of All Creatures Great and Small, which was picked up by Channel 5, which is now having great success in America. PBS have picked it up and they got, I think, 3 million viewers for the first, the first episode of it. And so their judgment seems to be out as well, because all the good things that are coming into the BBC, the only things I ever watch, are produced outside of the BBC.
Yes, I mean, exactly. And, you know, I think that reform now would actually have public support. And that's probably a reflection of the fact that it's not providing programming that people want to watch. A poll in December 2019 actually found that 56% of people think that the BBC should secure its own funding. And, you know, as you touched on there, Mike, I think there are concerns over institutional biases, over, you know, accountability, responsibility, and, you know, whether people should be forced to prop up sort of pet projects of producers at the BBC rather than people actually having, you know, a choice as to what programming they're getting to watch.
Well, this is it. And they've actually got, unbeknownst to most people, they've actually got 10 television channels at the BBC, right? They've also got something like 65 small independent BBC local radio stations. They've got the behemoth that is BBC Scotland. I mean, it's just such a big organisation that you cannot believe that if any ordinary entrepreneur went inside of it, they couldn't slim it down and make it about 50% more efficient and 29 to 30% cheaper.
Well, exactly. I mean, now, of course, has been the argument made that you could salami slice the BBC and a decent chunk of its programming. But what we at the IEA, or at least our expert Professor Philip Booth, has suggested is that we move towards a subscriber-owned mutual, and that would allow the broadcaster to be a commercial success. It would better leverage its brand internationally, and it would produce programming that its member viewers value. It would add diversity to the broadcasting world by creating a unique successor to the BBC as a government corporation. I think that would just have a lot of advantages over alternative models of reform.
Yes. I mean, the argument against that, I suppose, in the subscription model is that older viewers might not be able to actually manage to do that, which is slightly kind of condescending, I've always thought, because presumably, older people are not as hopeless with technology as some people would suggest. And equally, if they can't manage it, they could probably get somebody to do it for them.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, often when we look at the BBC, we look at the over 75s and the under 75s, and where we're seeing a huge decline in the number of viewers and listeners is in that latter category. It's people under the age of 75. But like you say, Mike, I'm pretty optimistic that those who like and support the BBC, and I happen to think a lot of under 75s would, if we were able to move to a more competitive model where the BBC was forced to provide programming that people actually want to watch, then we'd end up with a far better service that more people would want to subscribe to anyway. But I think we could end up with more viewers and listeners across the board, regardless of their age. But like you say, I think for the over 75s, I'm not sure that the argument that they wouldn't be able to access live streaming services or other broadcasting channels post BBC as it is at the moment world, I just don't think that argument holds water.
No. And in your model at the IEA, what do you do with the big sort of network of local radio stations? Because it really is very much, for me anyway, an impediment to commercial operations. You cannot start a local commercial radio station, particularly a speech station, anywhere in Britain, because it's overwhelmed by the local BBC, who just suck everything up, employ all the people who can do anything in that particular neck of the woods, and pay top dollar.
Well, yes. I mean, as I say, I think you would have to salami slice it from the outset. There are a decent number of radio stations that possibly wouldn't survive were they not able to pull in the viewers. And there would undoubtedly be some downsides to whatever model you try to adopt that's different to one at the moment. But I just think that the arguments against the BBC in its current form, the fact that it's not adapting to a changing technology landscape, the institutional biases that we talked about earlier, the fact that it distorts competition. The BBC comes under very little scrutiny in relation to competition issues. It's able to provide services for free that undermines business models for similar content provided by other organizations. And then you also have the public support for reform. I think that these arguments drastically outweigh, the arguments for keeping it in its current form. Among those might be the fact that you're propping up local radio stations.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget as well a survey recently that was done about trust in the BBC, and literally 6% of people said that they trusted what comes out of the BBC in terms of their news content. So, I mean, they're not in a very good place right now.
No, and I think that this stems from the fact that it's trying to appeal to a very small corner of the market that isn't really representative of its typical viewers. I think, if you look at the fact that a Newswatch analysis of the EU debate found that between 2004 and 2015, only 3% of speakers on Radio 4 were explicitly in favour of Brexit. I think a lot of viewers, a lot of listeners are worried that it's just not representative. And of course it should be a neutral broadcaster, and it shouldn't be a participant in the left dominated culture wars.
No, exactly right. Annabelle, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Annabelle Denham, Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. The BBC, I have to tell you, is in real trouble because the BBC cannot for the life of me continue with the model that it has. Paul in South Wales says this: "Hi Mike, if the BBC is such great value compared to Netflix, why don't they move right away to a subscriber model? Surely viewers and listeners will flock to them and their balance sheet will look healthier than it does now. It's time they put their money where their mouth is." And of course, Paul, you will know that one of the great behemoths of Wales is BBC Wales. It's one of the big employers in Wales. It's particularly a big employer for Welsh-speaking people in Wales, because they insist on putting out the Welsh-speaking channel. And so, therefore, it's a self-perpetuating public sector gravy train, for heaven's sake. This is Talk Radio.